getting lost and finding our way, all the things that our phones don't let us do anymore. I literally do not put in an address in maps anymore. I look it up before I leave, and I write it on a piece of paper. And because guess what? When you don't have Siri telling you which way to go, your brain is working in ways that it hasn't worked in a long time. And then sometimes you get lost. And when you get lost, you see things that maybe you never would have seen before. And so I just hope that people read the book and go, well, these are some things that I can do to fall back in love with the art of being human again.
Carlos, welcome back to the podcast, man. It's been a couple of years since we've chatted, but it's
back.
so good to see you. Yeah.
I'm winning today. I'm back.
Well, we're going to start there, aren't we?
Yes, we are. I really feel like I am. We've had a good little chat before we hit record, and it does. It feels like things are good. So,
man, it's just good to see you. A lot has happened since we hung out last. A lot in your family. You moved your parents up here. I don't know. So Hayla got married 2 weeks ago at the time we're recording here. Catch us up on life lately, because I think it'll lay the groundwork for this conversation that is so relevant to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I to kind of catch you up, wherever catching up is for your listener, I'll just kind of lay it out where I'm at right now. I live in Nashville, Tennessee with my wife of 24 years as of a few weeks ago, and which is just crazy to hear. I moved my mom and dad across the street from me. My dad has been diagnosed with dementia a few years ago, and so my mom's been his caregiver. We moved them from LA to Atlanta, where my brother lived, and then they lived there a few years. And as his dementia has progressed, we just needed them a little closer. My brother was still like 30 minutes away. And so we literally bought the house across the street from my house. And when I'm home, like, it feels like a full-time job, if not maybe a 3/4 time job, like of taking care of my mom and dad. And so here I am, in this season of life where I'm legitimately helping my mom with every decision she's making, with all of the medical decisions, seeing my dad every day, doing those things, and then also launching my kids into the world of young adulthood. And both my daughters have graduated from college this last May, and one of my daughters got married, just like you said, and my oldest daughter got married a couple weeks ago, and my son is 18, and I'm just like, holy cow. Like it's like just a left and a right, every single day. We were talking about this right before we hit record, but just how it just feels like there's always some loss and always some gain and always some joy and always some pain at the same time, every moment of every day. And I think I'm learning after not everybody, I will go ahead and say that I had a very blessed life. I don't even want to use the word blessed. I had a life with not a lot of pain involved up until like 20, maybe it was self-inflicted pain, but like 2018. And then it's just like, well, now the pain's coming from other directions and I'm managing other people's pain, yet while I'm still having the time of my life doing things. So yeah, man, it's a big smorgasbord of emotions and great things and hard things all at the same time. So it's cool. And I'm still writing books. I'm still talking about them, and I'm still doing the things that that I feel like I'm called to do.
Where do you slot all of that in your soul? Because you had mentioned loss and gain, and in a way, like we talked about before we hit record, we learn how to hold loss and gain, pain and sorrow, joy and sorrow, rather, in the same hand. How do you find the slots in your soul for all of that so that you are not pulled in so many directions all at once, or maybe you are, that you're living on fumes, like you're just coasting?
Yeah.
We're going to get to the disconnected soul here soon, but curious.
I think even before we get to the disconnected soul piece and before we get to what I did on purpose, I think while I'm not in the midst of doing something drastic to help those things, I think that every single day if I don't have my rhythms every day, like I'm legitimately the rhythm of when I'm traveling, I don't have this rhythm. Like my alarm goes off. I get up, I shuffle to the kitchen. I hit grind on the coffee beans. I hit start on the brew. I do the whole thing, and I sit down and I get in the word and I read the Bible while it's brewing. And I know like the 10 minutes it's going to take to brew, and I know I'm going to get through my daily prayer, and then I'm going to go get like all of these tiny little things that I've developed in my life to give me just that. Like, I just don't feel like we're inhaling and exhaling enough and thinking about it every day. And so I'm just making sure that I have 2 or 3 moments a day where I get to do that, and I look forward to doing that. And it's okay. You know, right before I jumped on the podcast, I was telling you, I was like a couple minutes late. I literally was outside filming a robin feeding its babies, and I sat there for like 15 minutes in a chair, and I felt like the oldest man. I'm like, look at me. I'm sitting in a chair watching but you know what it was? And I feel like that's the ticket. Like, when life gets chaotic, when life gets, you know, if you've got people in the hospital that you love, if you're in the if you've got pain and all, you can still do that every single day. You can still take time to breathe and to step into those rhythms. So that's what's helped me.
Yeah, put some language on that. You said that's the ticket. What specifically is the ticket? The breathe moments, the pull away for 5 minutes moments?
Yeah. I mean, let's just, you know, I mean, I'm not necessarily ever unpacked it, you know, on a microphone, but for me, my ticket has been those rhythms that I know I will do every single day. Like, I know at least 3 times a day, I'm going to stop for 15 minutes and I'm going to savor. I'm just going to savor what it is. You know, there's a chapter in my book all about savoring. And I just feel like we've lost that. And when you can stop and you can savor every day, if you just stop one time today and you savor your coffee, or you savor your time reading, or you savor a conversation, if you just savor one time a day, you're going to be like, holy cow, wait a second. So you're telling me, self, that I have the opportunity to breathe again every day when I savor. I can do this more than once. I can do this twice. So yeah, so today I savored my coffee. I savored this time with the birds. I savored 7 minutes on the sofa with my newly married daughter, who came home, and she just plopped down next to me and stuck her head on my shoulders. And guess what? I shut off YouTube. I turned on, and we just kind of sat there, and I just savored. So I do feel like these, you know, again, thanks for asking the question so I could unpack it a little bit. These moments of savoring every single day is the ticket to being able to handle the freaking tumultuous waves that are coming our way every day. We're more in charge than we think we are.
We're more in charge than we think we are. So folks might be asking this question, okay, Lois, I think I know how to do this, because inevitably I think you can be disciplined but not structured. You can be structured but not even disciplined. I talked to Erwin McManus about this a few years ago, and I'm just curious about this. In your temperament, your wiring, do you feel as though that's the ticket moment, right? Pull away moments. Is that the result of you being disciplined in priority, or is that because you live a structured day-to-day existence?
Neither.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I would say neither, because both of those things you just said, a structured order or a disciplined, like neither of those things are me. None of those things are me. Like, what it took for me, the reason why it's become important for me to do that isn't because of discipline, for me at least. It isn't because I even know I should do it. It's because when I finally did do it and I felt the breath that I hadn't breathed in a long time, it was like, oh, wait a second. So you're telling me, I don't know if I told you this story before, but it's exactly this. When I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, 15 years ago now, I'd never had allergies my whole life. And I moved to Nashville, and my wife started telling me that I was wheezing every night while I was going to sleep. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, it just feels like you have asthma. And I was like, babe, I don't have asthma. I'm running every day. Like I breathe in front of her. I was like, I'm fine. She's like, just go to a doctor. So I went to a doctor and an allergist, and he did all these allergy tests. He's like, yeah, man, you're really allergic to Tennessee. And I was like, I feel fine. He goes, well, do this. Blow into this machine. So I blew into this machine, and it was like a lung capacity machine. And it showed that I was only using like 60% of my lung capacity. And he told me that. And again, I still didn't believe him, because I'd been breathing at 60% of my lung capacity for a long time. I'd gotten used to it. So he gave me an inhaler. And if anyone that has asthma that's listening right now has ever used an inhaler when you have an asthma attack, I'd never used one. I took a breathed in, breathed out, and then the next breath, my breathing went from 60% to 100%. And I'm telling you, it was shocking that you could finally feel, I could feel all of the breath enter my lungs that wasn't entering before. And that's what happened when I started to savor. That's why when I started doing things, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I wasn't breathing. Now, why in the world would I not want to breathe? Why would I want to be as like spiritually or life asthmatic again? Like let's do it this way. So it's kind of a long story to explain it, but I just felt like I finally had breath.
No, that's so good, because I think you've just segued us into the disconnected soul and what it means to be reconnected. We'll talk about that. You said, quote, I felt the breath. In other words, perhaps you got reconnected to a facet of life that you didn't even know you were disconnected by. And I want to spend some time talking about this distracted, disconnected soul, because the scariest part for me, Los, especially I'd say in my type A driven temperament, is I might not know. I'll just go first and say, yeah, guys, it's me. I might not be able to spot it. In other words, I can't even diagnose the presence of distraction and disconnection. Sure. Walk me through what disconnection looked like in your life. And then, like, what was the toll taken on your mental health and your spiritual zeal? Yeah,
I think we're more connected as a society than we've ever been, right? It's I can pick up my phone, I'm connected to thousands and thousands of people. But even though we're more connected than we've ever been digitally or whatever, I literally feel like that's the reason why we're more disconnected than we've ever been. And for me, kind of making my living on my phone, making my living being on, I got a freaking, you understand, I got a camera pointed at my face 24/7. I'm sharing my life. It gives you a false sense of connection. And I don't want to, I don't want to say that connections that happen on your phone or online aren't real. But I will say that they're not totally real. They're just not, breath to breath, eye to eye connection is what we were created to be. And so it's cheating. We're cheating relationship. And so I just was so disconnected, and I would say that, even with my family and my wife and my kids and my friends around me, they, from before I did this little experiment to after, they're literally like, you're a completely different human being. Like my friends and family are saying that, and they're just like, and literally all you've changed is you've reconnected with yourself and you've reconnected with us, and you're not always connected with people that you don't know. And so that was that was, I think, the point of contention for me. I'd done a lot of hard work prior to 2022. I'd done a lot of healing, inner healing. There was a lot of great healing stuff that was going on, but I still was just dull. There was a dullness to what it used to be sharp, if that makes sense. And so, I think even people like you that have more of a type A personality than me, I think what happens is maybe you start seeing, oh, wait a second, things aren't as sharp per se as they used to be. And I think a lot of that dullness is coming from not being as connected as we should be. And so for me, I just kind of started feeling it, seeing it. People started telling me it. And, it led to where we are today.
That's wild. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Overcoming Apathy by a guy called Uche Anazor. He's a professor at Biola. He, in it, is unpacking acedia, this spiritual sloth, apathy. He describes apathy in a dullness type of way. It's not being careless. It's being, as he says, care adrift. It's like misplaced affections. Does that resonate with you at all, Los?
Yeah.
Like when you talk about dullness, is that synonymous in a way with misplaced affections? Here's where I'll focus it, because, as you said, you make your living in a way with a camera in front of your face. So how do you inside make the distinction between, yep, it's a camera on time? In other words, you get up in the morning. How is it not reflexive that you're flipping your camera on while you're making the coffee? When Sohaila came over moments ago today to hang on the couch, you're like, nah, the camera doesn't need to be on now. Walk me through that.
I love how he went from careless to care adrift. I love that, because I actually feel like we care too much about things we're not supposed to care about, and what we're caring about is, and it's I can understand why he says care adrift, but I don't even feel like it's, for me, drifting anywhere. It's just me placing way too many cares on too many things that I shouldn't care about, and so I mean I can say that in hindsight now. Like I can look and be like, man, like I have the only type A-ness about my personality is that the only time I get like type A is when I'm in a new hobby. I'm very addictive personality, right? So like if it's bees or fly fishing or pickleball, like I'm like, whoosh, I'm all in. And I'm like tick tick tick, and I'll stack things and you order spreadsheets, and I'm all in. And honestly, like I just feel like these, again, we don't have to blame everything on screens, but these phones have caused us to maybe care about more than we were created to care about. And so, yeah, I can understand where that professor is coming from, because, maybe my cares are, maybe I care too much about things that I'm not supposed to be caring about, and I mean, this can get into the 24-hour news cycle. This can get into, knowing what's happening around planet Earth, when maybe we were just created to know what was happening within 10 miles of where we're at. And that's all our souls ever were created to know. Not that knowing that, there's wars happening and praying and sending, resources down. Not that stuff is bad, but I think we just have to be careful that our cares don't drift away from what they were actually created to be sitting on.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stay here. How do we know then what should get our attention? You had given us language in your new book about your conflicted soul.
Yeah.
Pull the thread on that. Like how are we supposed to really know what should get our attention? Because if you struggle with people pleasing, like I do,
sure. Yep.
I'm like,
Same.
I don't want to let this person down.
Yeah.
Or if you've dealt with a level of codependency, like I have, I'm like, crap, if I don't do this, then I won't be fill in the blank.
Yeah.
That enters the conflicted soul idea for me.
Yeah. I mean, my soul was and always will be, until I get to the other side of the veil of heaven and earth, conflicted in some way. I think the question to ask yourself, the question I have to always ask myself now, hindsight again, is the people that are directly around me on a daily basis, do they feel like my cares, like I care about them? And I'll be honest with you, if I would have asked my wife that in early 2022, she would have said, I believe you love me. I don't know if you care about me. I know that you care about a lot of other things. And so just start there. Just start with your kids. Walk up to your kids and say, hey, how can I care better for you? And if they give you an answer, if they tell you, oh no, you're great. Awesome. I guarantee you they're not going to say that. Especially if you ask the question, how can I care better for you? When they tell you, that's where you start. And so, you begin there, right? So in my world, I'm trying my hardest to care with everything inside of me about my wife, my kids, my new son-in-law, and my mom and dad. Like every day that's where, and guess what? Here's the thing. There's been a lot of chaos happening around the world. There's been a lot of, and I've spent the majority of my, at least the last 4 years on socials, talking about very hard things that are happening around the world. Suddenly what happened is the last 7 months, I haven't talked about those things a lot. And there's been people that I want to please that I don't know, okay, but they're in my comment section every day, or they're in my DMs, that will come to me and go, hey, Carlos, you're not talking about this. You're not talking about this. Like, do you not care anymore? Like, this is why I followed you, because and you know what I have to finally realize is I don't have the capacity to actually care like I used to, because guess what? I was replacing the care that I was supposed to be giving to those directly in front of me with care about other issues that are very important, but that weren't directly related to me. And I've just realized that nobody has the capacity to consume and care about all the concerns in the world. You got to start with what's in front of you. And then with what's left over, then you can start to spread that care out to other things. But I had to really reset. I had to reset it. And once I reset it, guess what? I've been able to have a couple of conversations about some harder things in cultural climate, but not near as many as I used to, just because I've reset it.
So there's a lesson to be learned in this, and I'd be curious about your wisdom on this. How do we tactically get rid of the unhealthy burden to take on responsibilities that should never be ours in the first place?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I don't know if I have the answer on how, because I think it's going to be different for everybody. So I'll just look in the mirror and I'll just say, I think about, let's just rewind before we had access to so much information, right? Let's go back to 1942, which I wasn't alive, but let's just imagine for a second. And I think about decisions I'm going to have to make right now in order to make sure that my cares aren't. I just love the care drift. How did he say that again?
Yeah, he said regarding apathy, it's not being careless. It's being cares adrift.
Cares adrift. Okay, so
misplaced affections.
Misplaced affections. So again, let me just look at me.
Yeah.
I realized that the social media or access to more information was causing me anxiety and causing me to worry about things that were out of my control. So what I had to do is start to cut those things off that were leading me to worry about things. That took me all the way to even something as simple as, like, if you're a parent and your kids have phones, you know that there's an app called Life 360. Life 360 will tell you how fast your kid's going, when they, if they get in a wreck, when they get to, to this place, when they get to that place. And so, like, I had all my kids on Life 360. I even had to ask the question when my daughter went to college. I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to delete this app off my phone, because I don't know. And again, I don't want to be controversial, but I don't know if I was created to know where my daughter was at 2 a.m., when she, and to have to go, I wonder why she's there. I wonder when she's going to get, and next thing you know, she was there studying, or there was no problem, but I had problems enter my mind because I had access to information that maybe I wasn't ever supposed to know. So for me, I had to start reducing, just knowledge of things that maybe I wasn't supposed to know. And man, it gave me breath. It was like an inhaler. It was like, oh my gosh, like suddenly, like, guess what? My parents didn't know where I was 24/7. And yes, the world's different in the world, yada, yada, but the world's always going to be different. There's always going to be dangers, And so not only social media wise, but I had to start making decisions on what information I was allowing into my head that was going to cause anxiety, and start to remove those.
So this is wild. And I just think about I wonder if you perhaps staring at the location, I don't know which one of your girls that was, but whatever, her location, the effect of that on your nervous system, on your mental health.
Oh,
and is it the same as the clickbait, the 24-hour news cycle? Do they have the same effect? Because there's a difference. What I hear you saying now, folks, listen to this, because the wisdom is this. The wisdom is the thin line. Los, what you're not saying is you weren't being a responsible, attentive parent. What you were saying is the maniacal drive to just glue to it was not helping anybody.
Right. It wasn't helping anybody. And you can worry without Life 360. You can worry without being constantly connected. But that was just for me something that I had to do. And to go back to your question or your comment right now, I think there is some similarities between even just doom scrolling and just like you're just scrolling, just consuming bad news. You're just consuming all of these things. And again, the effects on our nervous system. I say it over and over. We were not created with the capacity. Our souls were not created with the capacity to consume the amount of content we consume. They just were not. Nobody can argue that they were. And I mean, just look at the data, look at the statistics of anxiety, look at, what's happened. I mean, there was just oh my gosh, where's this article? I just read an article today where there was a tribe, somewhere that had never had any sort of technology in their tribe, and they got, oh my gosh, where is it? Oh, here it is. Remote Amazon tribe finally connects to the internet only to wind up hooked on porn and social media. This tribe had never seen phones or anything. Somebody gave them phones, and within 2 weeks, literally the tribe was connected and hooked. The men were hooked to pornography. It was no. I'll send you the article. And it was mind blowing because it only took 2 weeks for more information to completely ruin this culture. And, I don't know who gave it to them. I don't know why, but that's what happened. And I just think, again, it's just think, I just think less is more these days. Like, we hear that all the time in a lot of other things, but how about just less information is more living? Less information for me has been, oh my gosh, just more. I've gotten more ability to savor and to enjoy and to have solitude and all the things that I've been missing for so long. I just think this is very important for people to start asking themselves, are there things that I'm ushering into my life to care about that maybe I don't have the capacity to care about? Jeez. So
I don't know who said this to me a couple of years ago, but something to the effect of our bodies were not designed to live, to thrive in the world in which we currently live.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. It might have been Rich Villodas or something like that. But
yeah.
Okay, so things in a way for you hit a fever pitch, summer 2022. You make this decision to go completely screenless for 7 weeks. I want to know why. And then you ended up in this monastery in Southern California. Like, how'd that come to be? From the decision to forsake your devices to landing at St. Andrew's Abbey.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. We get that. I can't say we, I don't know if everyone does, but a lot of people I know, you get a screen time notification like on Sundays. Every week it comes, it's like your screen time was down 0.279%. Well, I always I see the number and I'm like, ooh, gross. And then I swipe it away. I don't ever kind of dig into it. Well, I dug into it at the beginning of 2022, while I was actually writing my last book called How to Human. Okay. So remember, I need you to remember this. I'm writing a book called How to Human, and I get a screen time notification that says I'm on my phone like 7 hours and 23 minutes a day. And I remember thinking, ooh, like that's a lot, but whatever. I mean, it's my job. But then I kept going with the math, and the math was like something 49 hours a week, which is like 2 entire cycles of the sun a week that I was looking at my phone, 8 days a month, 3 months a year. And if I live to make it into my late 70s, I think I'm going to spend 8 years of my life looking at my screen. That was the point. That was the, just where I kind of fell over, and I was like, okay, I'm writing a book called How to Human, and I'm the least human I've ever been. What do I do? And so I talked to my wife about it, and she's like, my dad used to be a volunteer at this Abbey monastery in Southern California. And my wife kind of grew up in the summer times at this monastery hanging out with these monks. And she's like, you want me to call Father Abbott? And I was like, sure. Father Francis, sorry. She called and then put me on the phone with him. And I said, hey, what if I came? So initially this idea was just for like 3 days. The idea was just, let me go to a monastery for 3 days. Let me just, delete social media. Let me do that. And immediately when I started asking some friends, and then I emailed my agent, Alex, and it rapidly turned into, no, deleting social media and not looking at your, watching YouTube for 3 days at a monastery isn't, I mean, anybody can do that. You need to do something that nobody is willing to do. So I started thinking, Chris, like, there's a lot of books on the dangers of social media or the dangers of phones and all these things, but I had yet to find one where a person that is in our subculture, just connected to phones every day, literally does not look at a phone or a screen for weeks. I was like, well, I'll be the guinea pig. And so I did, man. And so ended up, moving to St. Andrew's Abbey for 14 days and lived among 20 Benedictine monks in 23 hours a day of silence, and it was terrifying, horrible, all the things you would think it would be for a few days, until it became the most beautiful thing that I've missed the most. You can have two things at one time again. And so started there, and that's how I ended up there.
Wow. Back me up. Talk about that anxiety-ridden moment you had on the airplane going there. You were like doing something on Instagram, and you had this full-blown panic attack. Like, did that push you further into the experience? Walk me through that. Well,
here's the thing. So the experiment ended up being, as I'm on a flight to LA, the experiment, I know I'm about to not look at a single screen, phone, laptop, TV, Apple Watch, iPad, no screen. I'm not going to consume any content for 7 weeks. And so in early 2022, it's like, man, what a cool experiment. But then when you're actually on your way to do it, And I actually was going to get my brain scanned as well by a neuroscientist. So yep, Dr. Amen. And so I'm committed now. Like I've tried. The family knows I'm not going to be there. I'm on my way. And so I actually like logged on Instagram. Again, I didn't tell anybody what I was doing until the day I disappeared. And I still didn't tell anyone what I was doing, but I said, hey, I can't remember what the post said, but it was like, I've been on, I've had a phone in my hand every day for the last 15 years and I just need some time away. So whatever, maybe a couple weeks. I don't know how long I'll be gone. And I hit post, and I'll never forget when I hit post, legitimately my body had a physical reaction. Like I was on a flight next to a man. I don't think I had a panic attack for a decade maybe. And the plane starts to spin. I start to sweat literally. It's not hot in the plane and I'm sweating. My heart starts to pound and palpitate. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get up. So I asked the man if I can go to the restroom, and I go to the bed, and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I'm having a panic attack from just telling people that I'm going to be disconnected. Like, Lord, what is wrong with me? I just got in my journal and I was like, something's wrong with me. Something's wrong with me. And it was, I calmed down, landed, went, got my brain scanned, and then got driven to the monastery. And it was probably 4 days of panic attacks every 2 hours. Like in the middle of the night, I'd wake up with my heart pounding, night sweats. And come to find out after talking to Dr. Amen at the end, he's like, you were legitimately coming off of the drug of information. Like your body was coming off of the drug of information. And it was, and so it was horrible until about day 4 when I woke up and it felt like a elephant had stepped off my chest. And suddenly I was like, wait a second, this is where we're supposed to be. Not all being monks, not all being Amish or whatever, but like this is the way that our souls are, I think, designed to thrive. And I got to exist in a healthy space for about 10 days.
Have you read Dopamine Nation, Dr. Anna Lemke?
I've not.
Have you heard about it?
I've not.
The entire book. She's a Stanford University leading psychiatrist. She's been on this show a bunch of times, and her whole premise of that book, Dopamine Nation, it'd be worth the read because I think it would just add value to this present conversation you're in. She talks about really the hypodermic needle of this present day is indeed dopamine. It's our fix on dopamine. Wow. I'm curious. Walk me through timeline. So you go to California. So you're obviously in Southern California. You go to the Amen clinics. You're with Dr. Amen hanging out. He does the scan first, then you go to the monastery?
Yeah. Yeah.
Walk me through that, and what did he find in that initial scan? Yeah.
So the initial scan, I get my brain scanned. I do some cognitive testing before the brain scan, like, memory tests on computers, and like you're spitting numbers back and letters back to the computer, or they're flashing faces in front of you, 40 faces, and then they flash 40 other faces with some of the old faces in it, and you have to hit the space bar every time you see a familiar face. All of those things. And so my memory was right at the 50th percentile, like just kind of like average, of men, 18 to whatever. And then my brain scan, he was like, yeah, there's a lot of things that need to get fixed in your brain. There's some lumps here. Your cerebellum isn't firing like it should. It was actually a little worrisome, like when he scanned my brain, also knowing, Chris, that this wasn't a medical experiment, right? Like I was data point number 1 and he's going to scan the same data point's brain at the end. And so, I know that who knows if my brain gets better or it could get worse, I didn't know what was going to happen, but Dr. Amen was, I gave him all of my, my worries, my concerns. I told him that I have, a lot of anxiety over health issues, a lot of things. And normally if I have anxiety over health issues, what do? Is I go to Google, and then I try to find somebody that has the same problem I had that actually it didn't turn out to be, you're going to die in 3 days. And so then I feel better. And I'm like, well, if I don't have my phone for 7 weeks and something happens in my body, like, what am I going to do? Like all of these things were contingent on on the screen. And so, yes, so I go to Dr. Amen's clinic. He scans my brain. We've got the data point from day one. And then I drive to St. Andrew's Abbey, and my best friend drops me off, takes all my things, and just leaves me there. And I'm just kind of looking around, bro. Like it is, it's crazy. And I spent the next 14 days bro, it was like by day 4, it was miserable, but day 5, I got it. And then by day 13, Heather was coming on day 14 to pick me up. Honestly, like I was like, could I stay another 2 weeks? Like it just was, I don't want to be a monk because I love my wife and I, love all the things of not being a monk, but man, I got it. I freaking got it. I was like, I understand why you guys make a vow to this community and to live and to die here, because this is beautiful. It's purposeful. It's slow. I call it Godspeed. 3 miles an hour is how fast they walk. Everything was so purposeful. And once I got it, I was like, okay, I've got a lot of things I can bring back to my life, back to the land of screens. But I wasn't done because then I went to the Amish.
Yeah, I want to hear about that. You poked the box of hypochondria. You've touched on this a bunch, like the fear of sickness. If I'm honest, I struggle with it. I want to put a pin in that. I want to get some wisdom on that. Like, how do you navigate through that? But let's stay on the story here, because you posed this question in Reconnected. And man, when I read this, Los, I shuddered, because I think it's maybe just stage of life, the season I'm in right now. But you asked this question, and it was this: what if you were what if you were to suddenly lose your ability to do whatever it is that you're known for?
Yeah.
Dude, pull the thread on that, like the implications therein.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was you, right?
Yeah. I was about to say, how about this? How about maybe, I think I got to a place in my journal where I realized the reason I was having that panic attack on the plane was because I just pulled the thread. I literally just went, brrr, and not a single human being that I was going to interact with really for the next 7 weeks was going to know who I was, care about anything in my life. Like literally, like the only thing now that they had to represent me and my identity was me, which is crazy. And so, yeah, man, like there was not a monk that knew who I was. They'd never read my books. They didn't know that I was on none of that stuff. There was not a single person that knew who I was. And when I exist, my full-time job is making sure people know who I am. I mean, literally, like that's a hard way to say it, but it's what I do. I speak on stages. I write books so people can, and I didn't have any of that. And so I got to a place where it was pretty quick in the first few days where I was journaling. Like the Lord was like, okay, what if I take everything away? What if I take, what if you stay like this? What if nobody ever knows who you are again? What if whatever that gift is or that skill set is for you, someone could be listening to this podcast, and if you're like the best plumber in your city, what if both your hands stop working? Like who are you? Are you still okay? Are you still, and I had to live through my hands not working anymore, quote unquote, for whatever it is that my job was. And yeah, man, I had to rebuild my identity in something that was greater than me. And it's hard and it's scary. And I think it's a valuable exercise for people to do. I think you can start thinking, okay, God has gifted me in this, and I'm still going to use this, but I'm going to make sure that I am really building my identity in him as opposed to my identity in my woo or my wit or whatever it is that you're really good at. So yeah, that was I'd say the entire time I was at the monastery, it was God untangling that, it was God. Luckily, not everyone has to, everyone doesn't have to go to a monastery for this to happen. Just read my book and I'll help you do it. But it was, the entire time God was unraveling not only my identity, but even like my definitions of who God is, even because when my identity kind of started to crumble, and then I started to just think like, now I'm like, I don't have podcasts to listen to. I don't have Google to go find a YouTube video for some, pastor to help me listen to a sermon that is going to help me fix no, it was just me, a Bible, and my brain, and suddenly like the stories in scripture started sounding really far-fetched. And bro, I went through like people talk about deconstruction a lot, but when you have to do that in a space where you don't have access to what you would normally have access to help you. So, luckily I had access to monks, and I had access to these men that walk every day with God, and they helped me rebuild some things in my faith. It was really beautiful. But it was also terrifying. And so I'm not going to lie, there was a lot when you don't have your phone to pick up when your brain starts going and your hypochondriac sets in, or your doubt in God sets in, and you don't have just something to dull that so that you can just come back to it another day. And it just sits there in your brain and in your heart all night long. You're going to have some wrestling matches that I think a lot of us maybe should have been wrestling with some of these things a long time ago. But the fact that we can numb our brains and disconnect so easily has caused a lot of people to, I think, get stumped in their growth when it comes to a lot of these things.
Yeah, I got to ask about hypochondria. That is such a real and up close thing for me. But I want to kind of go here first, though. Again, yet another book I'm reading right now. It's called Isolation Loss. I would literally text you a link to it, but it's out of print. It's a booklet, actually. It's 60 some pages, 1997. But what you've described, this book is all about really this place of the transformation in the life of a leader. And she describes these 4 phases: stripping, wrestling, intimacy, future, and how, she says 2 out of 3 cases were put there involuntarily, but you voluntarily put yourself in this. And yet there is a stripping of ministry identity, of function day to day. Talk to me about the wrestling with the Lord in that season, the wrestling in both identity, theology, union with him. Like, what did that wrestle entail, to the extent you're comfortable? Because I know a lot of it's probably real personal.
No, I mean, I think the big question that I wrestled with initially was the realization that when I logged off Instagram, people were going to be like, "Oh, that sucks," and then 1 second later, they're going to scroll to the next person that didn't disappear, and then for the next 7 weeks, truth be told, at least for me, I have friends that disappear off. I'm going to take a social media break for a month. When they come back, I'm like, "Oh, you were gone. I didn't even know." And so I think for me, there was this realization of like, actually, no one cares. Like I'm putting a lot of who I am into a space that is purposely makes things disappear. Right. And so that began my wrestle with my identity. That began my wrestle with like, is what I'm doing even worth it? Do I need to change career? I'm telling you, my brain went 1,000 different places over 14 days. Do I need to, do something else, God? And then God, like, are you even hearing me? God, are you even real? God, like, wait a second, hold on. The next thing you know, I start reading, and just reading the Gospels again. I'm like, man, this sounds like a fairy tale. And then, so now I'm 6 days in and the gospel sounds like a fairy tale to me. And I'm like losing my mind. And, I was talking to some monks and, just about kind of this crisis that I'm finding myself in. And I couldn't get to any sort of digital, pacification. Like I couldn't be pacified by anything else but just the word, and prayer. And, I think I tell the story in the book where I was talking to Abbot Francis, and he just told me that he wanted me to go climb to the top of this mountain that was behind my hermitage at the Abbey. And he wanted me to go and behold. And I was like, behold? I was like, well, that's such like a, King James word. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, behold? He's like, I want you to just go behold who God is. And I just remember going up there and sitting, it was a cemetery where a lot of the monks are buried, but it was beautiful. And you could see the mountains and the San Gabriel Mountains, and the storm was rolling in. And there was just something about God going like, wait a second, stop. You're trying to find me in your brain. You're trying to find me in your, in what you can figure out. Just come up here and look for a little bit. And man, bro, it was like the storm rolls in, and then there's this meteor shower at night, and then all these things. And, God was like, I just got really quickly, I got to a point where I was like, wait, how can God not exist? It's like I went the opposite direction. It's like I didn't try to find God in like my phone and sermons, and even honestly, even the Bible wasn't clicking for me at that point. I had to get outside of my own eyeball, like of the things that were right in front of me that I was reading, and I had to look at the grandness of who God was. And suddenly I was like, there's no way that this is all an accident. Because that's really where I went to is I started thinking maybe this is all an accident. Maybe this is the Big Bang. Maybe this is all, maybe there is no God. Maybe, and my brain went there, my heart went there, and it was a terrifying maybe 48 hours until God just really quickly pulled me back. And so, a lot of the pulling back had to do with the cadence of the days at the monastery, right? Like I was wrestling with God, but I was still I was praying 5 times a day with these monks for 30 minutes at a time, chanting, in Latin, words that I didn't even understand. But there were these moments where God's like, you can wrestle with me, but guess what? When the bell rings, you got 5 minutes to get to the chapel, and that's going to happen at 6 a.m. That's going to happen at 8 a.m. That's going to happen at noon. That's going to happen at 5 p.m. That's going to happen at 7 p.m. You have to come back in here, and and the beauty of these melodies, I'm going to begin to heal some things in you. And so as I was wrestling, I was still surrounded by 20 monks that loved God with everything. And the Lord, worked a lot of those things out. And by the time I left the monastery, again, it was about 22, 23 hours a day of silence because I wasn't really talking to a lot of people. By the time I left, I was probably closer to God than I'd ever been.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of ask about, because often I've found, at least from the case studies of looking at people in the scriptures, the wrestling will lead to a level of intimacy. And I want to connect that to your experience, because you said way early in this conversation that the people closest to you said, dude, you're a totally different person. In other words, how do you think that wrestle, which led to intimacy, which opened up perhaps eyes to see your future, your identity in a new way, how do you think that shaped you spirit, soul, body?
We don't allow room for wrestling with God in our lives because it makes us uncomfortable. And so when not only did I allow room, but I couldn't get away from the wrestle. Again, I just talk about the fact that we can just detach our minds from wherever our minds are going by scrolling on a screen. And I wasn't able to do that. So I was forced to wrestle. Like I was like, man, this is it. I'm in the ring and we're going for it, God. And it was wrestling. It was cussing. It was crying. It was like 2 a.m. God, are you real? I mean, I can't remember all the things I screamed at 2 a.m. in that hermitage up at the top of this hill at this monastery. And I just feel like I have been through, when you meet somebody, and you just know that they've been a fighter, like they've just fought, right? I know a couple people. I know 2 fighters in the UFC, and you just meet them and you're like, oh, dude, this dude has like fought people. And I suddenly now, I've never had this before, but I'm like, man, I've really fought with God. Like I've wrestled in ways that I never thought I was going to wrestle, and I've come out on the other side, just with the confidence that I know, like, okay, I can handle that. God brought me through that. There's maybe even a little bit of a swagger where I'm like, listen, people, like what God can handle your cussing. He can handle your screaming. He can handle all. So I say it was a wrestling match. It's not like God was wrestling with me. Mm-hmm. I was definitely wrestling, right? Mm-hmm. When there's a kid throwing a tantrum, you got a 2-year-old and you're like, you just kind of have your hand on him and you're like, well, you're not going to win, but I'm just going. And I just feel like I came out on the other side with a little bit of confidence a lot of bit of confidence in knowing how real God is. And my family kind of seeing that in me, like, whoa, they just kind of are like, you just went through something that actually nobody that we know has ever done. I still don't know anyone that's not looked at a screen for 7 weeks. So they kind of looked at me, even my family, like almost like they were proud of me. Like, wow, like I don't know if I could do that. And the fact, when you have people that love you, that are proud of you too, that brings a little bit of like, and I don't want to ruin it either. Like I want to make sure that I'm I'm even the last few days as I launched my book, I was on my phone way more than I have literally been maybe in the last 2 years, just because I'm like launching this thing and I'm like reposting. And I literally feel gross. I feel like hungover. Oh yeah. And I told my wife, I was like, babe, like I feel awful because I'm
hungover.
It's like I was doing a drug that I hadn't done in a long time. So yeah, man, I know I kind of circled that question a little bit, but
no, it's good.
It's kind of where I'm at.
No, it's super good. I do want to go to this place because I think we could serve people well in it. It's personal to me. We've talked twice. We've mentioned twice hypochondria, the fear of sickness. Where did this start for you, Los? I really struggle with the same thing, and it's even connected to this conversation in a way because my unhealthy coping is to doom scroll and to tell myself, I'm not going to Google it, and then I do, and then I doom scroll, and then I text medical friends. It's maniacal, and it drives me nuts, Los. Like almost the compulsivity comes from the anxiety. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I talked to Dr. Amen about that being an issue for me, and I'm trying. Well, he started pointing to different parts of my brain scan. He's like, well, that's because this part's red, and he's like, I can't remember what part he said is like extra firing, and he's like, so when someone has a brain scan, that this part is firing a lot, that's actually the worrying part of your brain. And he's like, and so legitimately there was something healing about knowing that there's a doctor sitting in front of me that is pointing at a part of my brain that is glowing. That's like, we just need to calm that down. And I was like, and then he starts telling me how, he starts telling me, literally he's like the worrying part of your brain, what needs to, foods that you can eat and things that you need to stop, consuming, and, all of those things. So like, these were like the natural pieces of the, kind of hypochondriac thing for me. Like I started going, okay, like, sure, there's things you can put in place. Like there's like, rules that you can follow, that you're not going to doom scroll. You're not going to Google if something starts to whatever. But for me, I mean, let's just go straight to the healing point for me. I ended up going to my pastor's house and we were having dinner and I mentioned it. So this was right after I got home, and we're talking about kind of everything I did. And I was like, but I just, I'm so scared of dying. And man, it was so sweet of Jesus because, my pastor, she just looked at me, and Heather's right next to me and her husband Henry's there. And she's just like, okay, so like, this is actually spiritual. Like, I know that because I was telling them that I could see it in my brain, the hypochondriac part. She's like, okay, the natural's great and you can eat the things or whatever, but this is actually spiritual. So let's just go ahead and get rid of it. And I was like, what? No, this has been my whole life. She's like, no, let's get rid of it. So man, it was about 40 minutes of deep inner healing prayer. And casting, there was a legitimate spirit of death that I traced into my story back to a moment, when I was maybe in second grade. My next door neighbor, I think she may have been anorexic because her sister, came running over, banging on our door. And she's like, I think her name's Tanya, was her sister. Tanya, she's on the floor. And me and my mom went running over there, and I saw her die. And I saw her die right there, and I was really little. And it was horrible. And they went to the funeral. And during this prayer time with my pastor, I traced it back to that point. And then, so what did we do? Now you go back to my book, Enter Wild, and we just freaking went back and Kill the Spider, went back to that place, blood of the cross, power of the resurrection. I cut that thing off. And let me tell you, this is crazy. So I can't go to the doctor and get my blood pressure taken without white coat syndrome. So my blood pressure whenever I go to the doctor is like 180 over 100. But then I come home and it's like 120 over 80. And there's, again, with people that have anxiety, understand this, like there's something triggering inside of me that I'm like obsessed with it, right? So now I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm going to try to, and then I'm like, well, now when I'm at home and I'm testing my blood pressure, I can feel my adrenaline spiking and I just can't get it, right? So we do this prayer thing. We pray, and she's like, I want you to go home and take your blood pressure. Because I wasn't able to take my blood pressure without it being super high in maybe a couple years. And I go home And I take it and I feel it. It's like high again. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's horrible. So then she's like, turn on worship music. So I turned on worship music and she's like, and I want you to pray the prayer we just prayed, because she wrote it out for me. I prayed it. During the worship song, I'm taking my blood pressure. I look again, it's 120/80. And there has not been a doctor's office or a time I've taken my blood pressure since that day that it hasn't been normal. And again, I just feel like it was the supernatural added to the natural. We have to add the super to the natural. And sometimes, Chris, we're just not going to be able to pull it off on our own. We're not going to be able to outthink it, to outmaneuver it. It's going to take something supernatural. And so supernaturally, I do feel for the last 2 years like I'm pretty much healed of my hypochondriacism.
And I received that for me. Did you say white coat syndrome? I've never heard of that phrase.
Yep. So white coat syndrome. It's a thing, because
I'd never heard of it.
I had neither. And when I was trying to get we were trying to get health insurance like 5 years ago, and I went to the doctor, and my blood pressure was high. He's like, you have high blood pressure? I was like, I don't have high blood pressure. I exercise every day. I eat fine. Like, I eat good. At the time I was like 43 or something. And then so I went home and I bought a blood pressure thing, and it was normal. And he's like, well, come back tomorrow. And I went back the next day and it was high. He's like, you have white coat syndrome. And I was like, what is that? He's like, it's people that when literally a doctor will put the cuff around their arm, you get nervous, your brain takes over, and your blood pressure rises. And so I had that, and I could never get a normal blood pressure reading at the doctor. And then now it's normal every time. I just went yesterday. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me, maybe if you want to kind of bring in the experience with the Amish farm as well to this. So through these 7 weeks, in fact, I'm going to ask this first. Yeah. Do you think, so you're at Henry and Alex's, you're having dinner, this comes to be, you and I have talked extensively about inner healing focus. I'm going to put a link to Carlos's, my last conversation in the show notes if you want to hear that. So we're not going to kind of spend time here today with that. But do you think you would have come to the place of realizing these discoveries if the 7 weeks hadn't happened?
No.
Really?
No. There were so many discoveries that I had just in the first 3 days. Okay, so I actually will say that most of the things that I had to work through were discovered the first 3 days. And then the remaining 6.5 weeks was more me basking in the goodness and seeing the beauty of not looking at a screen. So like the first 3 days were terrible, and my journal is filled with realizations, and God was just throwing all these things I needed to work on. And then literally the remaining 6.5 weeks was like, God was like, okay, now I want you to just enjoy and just notice all these beautiful things that you've not been able to enjoy. Some of those things with the Amish, some of those things with the monks, all of those things that you haven't really been able to do. And so I actually I'm working at this out right now. I think in 2025, I am going to come up with some sort of process and community where I can help people with this. But I think that the key, if everyone can do it, is if everyone can, I'm not saying delete social media. I'm legitimately saying if you can find 3 days, they don't even have to be in a row, but if you can make it in a row, make it 3 days where you do not look at a screen. Like I'm not saying delete Instagram. I'm not saying don't watch YouTube or don't watch Netflix. I'm saying do not look at a television, iPad, laptop. And most people are going to say that's impossible. And I'm going to say bullcrap. And I'm going to say you can do this. And when you do, this is what's going to happen. When you do that, God is going to reveal things inside of you within those 2 or 3 days that you never would have had revealed to you had you not done that. The volume of life is so loud that it has overtaken the volume of God. And so the second we drop the volume of life to a level to where the volume of God is booming, it's just going to take a couple days. He's going to give it all to you, and then turn the TV back on. That's fine because you've got it. You got all the words from him, and now you can work on those things.
That's powerful. Okay, so we'll start the descent of this conversation here with this. Let's fast forward through it. You get rescanned by Dr. Amen.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. So at that point, I remember walking through the airport at LAX. in between the monks and the Amish, and I'm flying to the Amish, right? And while I'm walking through the airport at LAX, like there's screens everywhere, right? Like just, you don't realize how many screens are around you until you leave a monastery, right? And I'm like looking straight down. I'm petrified to look at a screen because I don't want it to mess my brain up. And I had my paper boarding pass. I fly to the Amish. And I'll just be honest, the Amish that was just a delight. There was like nothing stressful about the Amish. Like I was, if I don't think I'd go become a monk, but I definitely would become Amish. They've got this community thing down. I leave there, I hang out with my family for another 3 weeks with no screens, and they have screens. I just don't look at them. I go back to get my brain rescanned. I walk in to Dr. Amen's clinic, and I do the cognitive testing again, and then I do the brain scan. And he walks in, he's like, well, I'll never forget. My heart was pounding. He's like, you ready to see your brain? And I was like, yeah. He goes, do you think it looks any different? I was like, I don't know. Honestly, at this point, I was like, what if it's worse? Like I had so much worry happening in my brain while I was gone. It's like, what if I damaged it by just worrying, you know? And he goes, well, the good news is your brain looks better. He goes, and then he says, your cerebellum has seen the most amount of healing. And he starts showing me my cerebellum. He's like, look at this. This is healed. He's like, and then when we look at these few lumps that are on the left side of your brain, like those look better too. The front divot that's there, that's healed a little bit. And so, you know, at the end of the day, the brain was better. The cognitive testing, my memory was at the 99th percentile. So legitimately, there was only 1% of men in America that had better memory than me by the end of this experiment. And, you know, all this to say, like, you know, both Dr. Amen and I were laughing because we're like, you know, this wasn't a medical study. Like, who knows if it was all the silence with the monks, if it was the working and we shearing sheep every day with who knows what it was. But everything together that you did healed your brain. And that's, you know, that's all we need to know. So yes, so the brain scan happened, and then the second most panic-ridden moment that I've had was I held onto my phone that was just off because my best friend Brian gave it back to me that day, and I just like didn't want to turn it on. Like I just stared at it, but I was like, I'm gonna have to at some point, and I'll just never forget turning that thing on after 7 weeks of not looking at it. And bro, that thing was like heat, like a freaking rocket ship, you know, like just all the dings and the pings. And luckily, you know, like I turned it on. I didn't even look at it. I just went to all of my messages, Control Alt Delete, deleted them all, deleted all my emails, and just kind of started from scratch, but with a whole bunch of new rhythms set into my life.
So good. All right, we'll kind of land this plane here. I want to know what your kids had to say about all this. I think about, because they're all Gen Z, and I know the reason I ask this is because I know many Gen Z. I have Gen Z siblings who are like, "Hey, I want that Nokia brick phone from back in the day that you could like throw and light it on fire and it still works." Yeah, I know a lot of people that are saying, "I want to kind of go backwards a little bit," and we are not demonizing, folks. Listen, we're not demonizing technology and smart, not at all. Yeah, like what's your kids' take on all this?
Yeah, I mean, they first of all, they the first day I was back with them, they didn't know what to do with me because I just was like so like staring at them, and they're just like, "Dad," you know. And when is this coming out? Okay, so by this point, everybody's actually going to know that I actually took a Sony camera with me on this entire 7 weeks, and there's a documentary coming out in October, and I interview my kids on how they felt when I was off my screen. And again, this is a tease for the documentary. Now you can listen to my kids' response on how different I was. I was a different dad. They were like, you've never paid this much attention to me. The things that they were saying was pretty mind blowing. And you know, I took a Sony camera with me that was just a actual camera, not connected to the world, so not a phone. And every night I set up the camera and I wept into the camera. And so there's a a full-length documentary coming out called Reconnected, where you can watch all 7 weeks of this, and it's going to be awesome. I can't believe that I didn't tell you this earlier.
No, it's so good. Yeah, folks, you're listening right now. The book is available right now. We're in mid-September, and just we'll put a link in the show notes to that. Dang, Carlos, thanks for being here. What if we were to distill this conversation down, give folks a call to action? We've given them so much today. What would you want them to know and to do coming out of this conversation?
I would just want them to simply, I would want this conversation to lead them to not start deleting apps out of shame, and not like shutting their phone off just because, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. Like, no, like I would want them to start finding the beautiful things around them that can lure them back into not picking their phone up enough as much. That's the thing that's happened for me. It's not that I've set up all these rules, like only 3 hours of screen time. Like I don't have apps shutting off. I don't have screen time, nighttime, like 15 minutes, the phone's going to go off. I don't have any of that stuff set up. I have just fallen so in love with looking people in the eye, having meals that are longer than 12 minutes, having meals that are 90 minutes long, savoring all of these things, looking at community and how is technology taking me away from community? So whatever that is a screen that's taking me away, I'm going to lessen that. That's what the Amish do. Like, it's not like they believe that cars are evil. They just know that if they have cars, they're going to be too far away from each other to help each other if a barn burns down. So like, that's why. So like, asking yourself these questions about technology, is it bringing you closer to who you were created to be, or farther away? Anything that's bringing you farther away, then you do less of it. And then you fall in love with the thing on the other side. And so I'm hoping that this is going to move people towards reading the book. And then they're going to realize that the book isn't anti-phone. The book is trying to get people to fall back in love with savoring, noticing, wondering, getting lost and finding our way, all the things that our phones don't let us do anymore. I literally do not put in an address in maps anymore. I look it up before I leave, and I write it on a piece of paper. And because guess what? When you don't have Siri telling you which way to go, your brain is working in ways that it hasn't worked in a long time. And then sometimes you get lost. And when you get lost, you see things that maybe you never would have seen before. And so I just hope that people read the book and go, well, these are some things that I can do to fall back in love with the art of being human again.
Good Lord. To wax a little philosophical, getting lost is actually good for growth.
Yes. How in the world are we supposed to learn how to find our way if we don't ever get lost? And guess what? Yeah. We no longer get lost anymore. And guess what? There's a lot of people that are having a hard time finding their way.
Carlos freaking Whittaker. Oh my gosh, that's another podcast right there.
Yeah.
Because this is Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. Yeah. This is a lot of the underbelly of the concerns about what is happening to our mental, emotional, and spiritual development. We talked about this book, Overcoming Apathy, and he talks about this, as I said, this cares adrift, but what it does to stunt our spiritual zeal.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You are fantastic. I love seeing you. I'm glad we got to catch up again. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. If folks already don't know how to get a hold of you and join the Insta Familia, why don't you tell them how?
Yeah, man. Loswhit, LOSWHIT on Instagram. I'm having a good time on there. Only follow me on Twitter if you want to see me when I'm grumpy. And
when you're what?
When I'm grumpy.
Oh my gosh.
So I feel like Instagram Carlos and Twitter Carlos, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Then I got books and things that you can read, and it's a good time.
Folks, listen, I'm just going to tell you straight up, Carlos has been, let's see, 1, 2, 3. This is number 4. This is you and Levi Lusko. Levi just told me recently it was his 5th or 6th time on the pod. This is your 4th.
Yes.
And folks, I just want to say this unabashedly. This is Carlos's best book. I implore you to get a copy. Wow. Go to the show notes at wintoday.tv. I mean, it's critical. It's necessary reading for this era. I think it parlays into a lot of the conversations we're having in culture, and it's necessary. And so I thank you for writing it. Thanks for being here today, my friend. It's great to see you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.